All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Contest Network, and I am excited to chat about a very interesting topic as my friend Swipe a Cam, he brought this up on X now, and I thought that this was fascinating. Who's going to be the best player of the entire 2020s decade? There is a lot to discuss there. There's a lot to unpack there, and there's still a lot left to go. This is, in some instances, actually the perfect time to generate some engagement on a question like this. Thought that was really funny and thought it was well played by Swipa. And there are so many fan bases that are mad, let me tell you. So I was very happy to chime in and would love to be able to see what people think about this particular topic between Nikola Jokić, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Zion Williams. No, just kidding. Not yet. Thought we were going to get Zion, but I think that's probably going to be a little bit until Zion actually contributes like this going forward. But we'll see. Maybe he makes the list. Maybe he makes the list at the end of the decade. But again, this is a very interesting question, and I wanted to be able to get it off my chest because it is once again the off season. So we get to chat about topics like this and have some fun. If you missed it, by the way, on Twitter, X, and basically every platform like social media platform, Instagram, YouTube, we've been releasing these videos at Mile High Sports like these short style videos, these short form videos, and this last one was about Antonio McDyess. And it was a really interesting story about how Jason Kidd, his teammate with the Phoenix Suns, was not allowed to be into the arena at Pepsi Center. Like, he was blocked by security from getting into the arena to chase down his teammate. And then McDyess signed with Denver. So if you want to hear about that story, make sure to go check that out. Lots of cool stuff, lots of interesting stuff that MHS is doing right now. And we've got a lot of things to cover going forward. There's no shortage of ideas for those YouTube shorts. So, and those other short form videos. We're gonna have a lot of fun with it. But without further ado, let's get into this main topic: the best player of the entire 2020s. When Swipa put together this this question, he had 3 players on the list, and then he actually only had 3 years in terms of the actual time frame of when that was decided. I personally, I think that beginning of the 2019-20 season is the 2020s decade, because it's the 2020 championship. Most of the season happened in 2020. Obviously, that was kind of affected by the pandemic too, but I thought it was a pretty interesting topic, and I decided, hey, let's open that one up as well. So we've got the 2020 season, and then 2021, 2022, and 2023. So 4 years worth of data on this particular topic. And what it actually says, I think, is really, really interesting. I'm probably going to approach this in a slightly different way than what Swipa did. I want to keep the conversation open, and I don't want to just discount the idea of somebody like Joel Embiid or somebody like Jason Tatum becoming that kind of like the defining player, because ultimately winning is what defines the era, and we still have 60% of it left to go from a decade's perspective. So let's focus on the champions and the finals MVPs to start. 2020, of course, the bubble year, that was with LeBron James. He and Anthony Davis combined for that. 2021, the Bucks with Giannis. 2022, the Warriors with Steph Curry. And this past year, 2023, Nikola Jokić won his first title with the Denver Nuggets. And so right off the bat, you see a problem here. Like, you don't have a repeat champion. You can't say anybody has dominated the NBA. So you have to go a layer deeper. Regular season MVPs by year: 2020, Giannis. 2021 and 22, you have Nikola Jokić. So, all right, you've got a little bit of separation here. 2023, Joel Embiid. He adds his name into that conversation. And if only he were able to get out of the Eastern Conference semifinals, then he'd probably be a more interesting conversation for him. Problem is that hasn't happened. Next category, the consensus best player by year on major ranking sites. I decided to look at the data from ESPN, Sports Illustrated, CBS Sports, and Bleacher Report as four outlets that have readily available lists at the beginning of each of those seasons. 2020, you had LeBron. 2021, you have Durant. 2022, you have Giannis. And 2023, it's TBD, but I think everybody's going to say Nikola Jokić. That is to be determined, obviously. But I thought it was interesting that in each of those lists, it was unanimous. Back in 2020, LeBron was the consensus best player, but it was by unanimous decision. Same thing in 2021, same thing in 2022, same thing in 2023 with all of these names. So, what that says to me for a variety of reasons is that there's a lot of groupthink that kind of goes into this conversation of who's the best player. Everybody sort of parrots the same narratives, parrots the same discussion points. I'm no different. I think that it's very fair to say that, especially after the bubble run, LeBron was well within his right to claim that title. Giannis, very interesting that he didn't get it after 2021. Everybody saw what Durant did in that series, and had his toe not been behind the line in the 2021 semifinals, then this conversation might be even different. But he did enough that he was the best player in 2021, as was pretty clear based off of these ranking sites. So, and then Giannis universally 2022, Jokić universally 2023. Really interesting to see Jokic's trajectory, by the way. He was about 9 or 10 in 2020. He was about 6 or 7 in 2021. He ranged from about 2 to 5 in 2022, and now he's going to be top 1. And I don't think anybody is going to be brave enough to not rank him number 1, which is pretty cool too. Next, cumulative stats. This is another category that I wanted to get into. This is one where you can actually put the empirical data to the test. It's not about the winning just by itself, because you win with a team. It is not just about the awards, because that is a little bit affected by different things. Here's what it says for the cumulative stats. Luka Dončić leads the NBA so far in total points in the 2020s. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that he's going to continue to get better. And he is healthy enough and young enough right now that it just would not surprise me that he would lead the entire decade in points. I'm pretty sure Michael Jordan led in the 90s. I believe that Kobe Bryant led in the 2000s. I could be wrong about that. I believe that LeBron leads in the 2010s because of Durant's injuries. And in the 2020s, I think it's going to be Luka. Alex English, by the way, leading scorer of the 1980s, who there might be something about Alex English coming across your timeline here pretty soon. Make sure to stay tuned. But I think that that is at least a good place to start for cumulative stuff. And I think it's a bode to Luka Dončić that he could rise up this conversation really, really quickly. And as long as he gets a functioning team around him, then it would not surprise me if he is in the top 3 of this conversation when it's all said and done, and might be at the top. Rebounds, Rudy Gobert, although Jokić is second here. Assists is Trae Young, but Jokić is also second here. By the way, Jokić was about 5th in total points in this entire decade so far. And while I do think that his personality will lead him to start scoring less as he gets older, he's not going to try to score as many points going forward as much as Jamal probably will, Michael Porter probably will. I think that Jokić is still going to be in the top 5 over the course of points. And my guess is that he probably doesn't catch Trae, but he probably will catch Rudy in terms of the actual cumulative number of rebounds that he has. And true shooting percentage, I thought this one was interesting. If you have the minimum number of minutes at 4,000, it's Kevin Durant with 65.6 true shooting. If you have it as 5,000, because Kevin Durant has played 4,800 minutes in the last 4 years, then it is Nikola Jokić at 65.4. So I would probably give that nod to Jokić. He leads in win shares as well. He leads in box plus minus as well. So you start to see where Jokic has really separated himself in a lot of these categories over the course of the decade. And I think that he is trending in that direction. He's kind of been beneath the surface of the conversation for much of this time. But now that he's won a championship and two MVPs, it's very possible that people say, yeah, he's pretty good. He might be the player of the decade. But here's what I'm going to go with. Who has been the top player so far? I compiled a list of 10 names that have been, I think, the best 10 players of the last 4 years. 4 years only. It is not the last 10 years. It is not the last 3 years. It is the last 4 years, which includes the 1920 season, the 2021 season, the 21-22 season, and the 22-23 season this past year. Number 1 is Nikola Jokić. Number 2 is Giannis. Number 3 is Curry. Number 4 is Luka. Number 5 is Embiid. Number 6 is LeBron. Number 7 is Durant. Number 8 is Butler. Number 9 is Tatum. And number 10 is Damian Lillard. I think that this is a pretty fair list based off of what's happened, based off of what is not likely, but like you factor in the winning, you factor in the stats, you factor in the culmination of 4 years worth of data and results and the impressions of everybody. And I think that this is a fair list. Durant hasn't had enough time over the course of these last 4 years to really jump up this conversation. LeBron, he has been like 2020, 21, 21, 22. Those were 2 not great years when it comes to the Lakers, but LeBron was good in that first year, not so good in that second year. And then this last year, he bounced back and deserves some credit for that, but it's not enough to really crack the top 5. I think the top 5 is really easy to figure out. Jokic, Giannis, Curry, Luka, Embiid. Those have been the 5 names that I think you have to put at the top here. Jimmy Butler deserves some credit. Jason Tatum deserves some credit too. Maybe Tatum even deserves to be higher on this list, but I thought that LeBron and Durant deserved that because of their status as best player in the league back in 2020 and 21, respectively. Dame, I think, gets onto here because of his overall levels of production. Although the playoffs have not been kind to Dame over the course of these last 4 years, maybe they will be kinder going forward. And it's one of the things that I want to make sure that he gets a mention on here, because if he does get traded to Miami and immediately wins a title this next year, then you start to think about Damian Lillard a little bit differently. You look at the stats that he's put up over the course of his entire career, and now you add a title with that, and you start to think, man, he might be one of the 10 best point guards ever, at least. So it's a very interesting conversation there, and he deserves some mention. The cases of those guys that should strengthen over the course of these next 6 years are Jokic, Giannis, Luka, and Tatum. Those are guys that I think will be good for, if not the entire length of the decade, the vast majority of it. And they're young enough that you could expect them to continue to grow, maybe win more titles, things like that. Cases that should weaken over these next 6 years are LeBron, Durant, and Butler. I think Butler is going to, he's definitely going to have some age-related regression for sure. LeBron and Durant, obviously those guys are nearing the end of their careers. It's going to be really difficult for them to raise their profile given what those guys have actually done. But I am very curious to see whether others disagree. And then to be determined, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, Joel Embiid. I think this is an important category here. Like I don't know if I was talking to a couple of other people about this, including my brother. If Steph Curry actually wins a title in this next year, he might be elevated over Magic Johnson in terms of the actual like what he's done in the league and his standing in the league. That is a debate that is currently raging, and it has both Lakers fans and Warriors fans incensed online. Some of them are the same person. Steph Curry is awesome, and if he won his 5th title, or hypothetically he won his 3rd MVP award, then that could really elevate him in a lot of cases. And Joel Embiid, if he actually raises up in terms of winning a title, or he wins another MVP or something like that, then that would be a strong benefit to him over the course of this decade. Do I expect that? No, but kind of like Dame, it's at least possible. So should be interesting there. And then some young players that I think could actually crash this party, or at least have a possibility to crash this party. Devin Booker is still young enough that, and still getting better, that I think that he could raise into this grouping by the time it's all said and done. His actual numbers, his advanced numbers, the playmaking for others, it hasn't been at the requisite level that it should be, but he is starting to figure that out. And if he continue, let's say he wins a title or two, and there's no reason why he can't with the formula that the Suns have, then it would not surprise me that Devin Booker actually rises up. I have Wemby on this list for obvious reasons. He will only have 6 years in the NBA by the time the decade is over, but it's enough time that I think he deserves at least a mention. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, been really good already. I had averaged 31 points per game this last year. What if the Thunder are just really good for the rest of the decade and he wins a title or two? That could really change the conversation. Zion Williamson, if he ever gets healthy and ever gets his head on straight, that would make sense. Donovan Mitchell, I mentioned in this conversation. I don't know if he's actually good enough, but I wanted to mention him. He's ninth in total points in the decade so far, and he's playing on a Cleveland team right now that if they were to win the title, then either he or Evan Mobley is likely going to be the main cause of that. So if it is Donovan Mitchell and he averages 30 points per game in a finals or something like that, then that's a strong indicator. So that's a possibility. Trae Young, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, other young players that I think could be there. Ant's numbers from an efficiency standpoint, from a metric standpoint, have not been good. They've certainly not been good enough to get him into this conversation. However, he looks like he's a player taking the leap. I compared him to Dwayne Wade online over the course of the last couple of days after seeing what he did with Team USA. He does feel like a Team USA kind of breakout candidate. So if he does raise up another level and become an MVP, then I could see him absolutely crashing that conversation. But in review, right now, I think Jokić, Giannis, Curry, Luka, Embiid, LeBron, Durant, Butler, Tatum, and Dame are the top 10 players of the decade so far. I think that by the time this is all said and done, I think that it will be Nikola Jokić. I think that he's the guy. If you are looking for a player that actually defines what's going on, I think that the Nuggets are going to win another 2 championships during this decade. Maybe they win 1, maybe they win 0, maybe they win 3, who knows? But I do think that what Jokić has done and how he will continue to age throughout his career, he's just going to get smarter. He's not going to get dumber, and he's going to get better in a lot of different categories. I think the defense is a lot of times it's a positional thing, and as long as he keeps up his physical fitness, I think that he will be a just fine defender over the course of the next 6 years. As he gets up into his early to mid 30s, it'll probably fall off a little bit and he'll be criticized for a lot of the same reasons that he was early on in his career. But I do think that he is the guy. Giannis, as my brother mentioned to me earlier, probably won't stay at this level from an athleticism standpoint for the next 6 years. He is 28, so it's not like he could be this athletic for his next 4 years, and that might be enough. And also, he could continue to develop that jumper. It's fallen off these last couple of years, but it was at a good point over the course of the previous 2. So there is at least a possibility that he jumps back into this conversation, as I think he's going to transition to center full-time going forward. Maybe not this next year with Brook Lopez in tow, but he's going to play a lot more center. And then Luka is the other guy that I think really has to be mentioned here. It's going to be Jokić, Giannis, and Luka if Luka can figure some things out. I do think that Steph is still at the age where he could absolutely be a part of this. He could absolutely be a part of this conversation. And I am very curious to see where he ultimately ends up. You know that the Golden State fan mafia is going to keep elevating him. I don't think I've ever seen a fan base as rabid as Steph Curry fans, which is nuts, but also not really surprising. Like he's awesome. He's great and deserves the love. But if I were to handicap it, I think over the next 6 years, I think that Jokic will end up being the top player of the decade, followed by we'll go with Luka Dončić, and then Giannis after that. That would be my top three. And Embiid, we'll see what happens with him from an injury standpoint, and whether he could recover from some of the latest turmoil that the Sixers are facing. But I don't see it ultimately panning out that way. I think it will be Jokic, then Luka, then Giannis. And so we'll see what happens. All right, let me know down in the comments if I got it right. When we come back, we are going to chat about the biggest threats to the Denver Nuggets winning a championship in the 2023-24 season. But first, everybody, you hear that? You hear that? That is the sound of football coming back. And now is the time and place to place your preseason bets with Superbook Sports. Superbook is the most trusted name in Vegas, and now you can use promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they'll match your money at Superbook with that promo code. All you got to do is use that promo code MILEHIGH, and they'll match your $250. Don't miss out on this football season. Win some money with Superbook Sports and the promo code MILEHIGh. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. And we're back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast as always. If you can, it'd be awesome if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. There's a lot of good stuff going on right now, and I absolutely appreciate seeing the growth of the MHS YouTube channel. I know that Swipe has been doing a great job on here. Cody Rourke's been doing a great job on here. We've got a lot of great content for you, and I hope that you're indulging as much as you probably should. All right. Biggest threats to win the 2020 or to the Denver Nuggets to win the 2023-24 NBA championship and repeat as title winners. I think that this is an interesting conversation and will continue to evolve, obviously. This may or may not be the right time to actually talk about it, but I just asked the question online and wanted to get some input on here as to what people are actually saying. The most common answer when I asked on Twitter or X from Nuggets fans was health. It was health. It was staying healthy as Jokic, Murray, Porter, Aaron Gordon, hypothetically KCP. I don't think that that's as much of a concern as many people do, but I think that health is probably the biggest concern. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment. 5555-ish in the comments says the biggest threat to the Nuggets winning again is themselves, and it's totally fair. It is a totally fair point, and one that I think Nuggets fans all feel pretty strongly. A lot of it is because Nuggets fans don't really respect the rest of the competition, and I'm not going to lie, it's probably fair. It's probably a fair point of view because I don't think a lot of these teams have built their team in the right way to challenge Denver. How many teams have actually loaded up on the talent to maximize their chances of taking down Nikola Jokić and Jamal Murray? I don't think a lot of them have. And as a result, I think that's an important part of the conversation. Like, let's just go through it. Actually, yeah, before we go through it, let's go through these other teams. The other most common opponents that people have talked about were the Phoenix Suns and the Boston Celtics. We'll talk about the Suns first. I think that is probably the right answer just because they could stop Denver before getting to the NBA Finals. I think that once Denver does get to the NBA Finals, if they were to, then a team in the East is probably not going to be the team to stop them because it is really hard to stop Nikola Jokić when you have not been seeing him for 3 to 4 times a year for several years. And a lot of these teams have their own game plans, and that would be my own personal opinion, but who knows? I think the Suns are probably the right answer, though, and it was probably the team that was answered the most by people on X, and that is a important piece of this because they trade for Bradley Beal, they retain DeAndre Ayton, you've got Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and if you just have those four on the court, then you've got a really, really good squad. One of the reasons why Denver beat them the way that they did was because Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they got tired. They wore down. They got a little bit banged up by the end of that series. And asking those guys to carry the entire load when Chris Paul wasn't able to, DeAndre Ayton ultimately got injured. That was a big problem. Instead of having to rely on Chris Paul again, which he's proven to not be reliable in the playoffs for obvious reasons, it's very old. Instead of relying on him, the Suns are going to rely on Bradley Beal. And I think that that's the right course of action. Beal is good. He is a really, really good player. Do I think that he's a great player? No. Do I think that he's better than somebody like Jamal Murray? No. But do I think that he can score 30 points in a playoff game? Absolutely. And if you just ask him to score 20 points in a playoff game pretty consistently, I think he's capable of doing that with relative ease. And so if you have that there, and you know that Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are going to average 30, then you don't need that much else. Ayton will get some points naturally. And then they added a mix of different veterans. Eric Gordon, I don't think they retained Jock Landale, but they like Devin Eubanks there, or Drew Eubanks. That's the one. They've got some other guys like Yuta Watanabe and Keita Bates Diop, and they drafted like the player that they drafted they like. There's reasons to believe that the Suns will challenge Denver. And especially when Denver doesn't have Bruce Brown, that is going to be a big part of this conversation. Like, who guards who in that particular matchup? Jamal Murray is going to have to guard Bradley Beal in all likelihood, while KCP guards Devin Booker. And then you've got Aaron Gordon to guard Kevin Durant, and Michael Porter will roam on whoever the weak link is, probably. That's not a great recipe for success consistently, but you do have Christian Brown, who will be a good defender on all three of those guys. And we'll see what actually happens. But that's probably the leading candidate. The Celtics are the other leading candidate, where they trade for Kristaps Porzingis. They give up Marcus Smart. And you look at the actual lineups that they can put together now with the defensive combinations that they have. You've got Porzingis, you've got Horford, you've got Robert Williams in the front court, and then you've got Jason Tatum, who is a 6'9" small forward, and Jaylen Brown, who's like a 6'7" shooting guard. And you've got some size. Like Derek White is a really good defensive guard. He would be helpful against a guy like Jamal Murray. They can put together some lineups that are really, really impressive and space Denver out on the offensive end, or like the defensive end, to the point where Tatum has a one-on-one against Nikola Jokić a lot of the time. And Tatum has proven that he can go at Joel Embiid in that same way. So I'm curious to see whether Jokić would handle that better or worse. Probably worse, which means that Denver's offense has to be better. And that's a tall task, despite the fact that I know that Denver's capable of it. So will be interesting to see whether the Celtics actually make it there or not. I think that they will. I wouldn't put my money on the Bucks. I wouldn't put my money on the Sixers or the Knicks or maybe the Heat again. Like I think the Heat could make it back, but it's probably the Heat or the Celtics to actually make it to the NBA Finals. And if Dame does get traded, I'm surprised that people didn't say Dame and didn't say the Heat in opponents that could give Denver trouble. Because if they do trade for Dame, which I think is a pretty strong possibility, obviously, then that is a pretty strong team, because they're not going to give up a lot. I think they're going to give up maybe Hero, who didn't even play in that series against Denver. Lowry will play less. They lost Gabe Vincent. They lost Max Strus. But I do think that if they got Dame, you've got some really, really interesting pieces with the Heat. But they did not make this list. The other most common opponents that did make this list are the Milwaukee Bucks, the Minnesota Timberwolves I was caught off guard by, but a lot of people said the Minnesota Timberwolves based off of what they've done, based off of how they've built and how impressed people are with Anthony Edwards. You've got the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. Those were the four others that people managed or that they mentioned. I think that the Bucks being on this list, obviously, that would be you get to the NBA Finals and you see Giannis on the other side. Giannis is, of course, a massive competitor. He would fight very hard, and if you have Brook Lopez as one of the other bigs, that's a good tandem to match up with Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokić in the front court. Now, the Nuggets have had success against the Bucks in their time, but if the Bucks are with playoff intensity in those moments, then I could absolutely see them really putting up a fight or just being the better team flat out. Do I think that that's going to happen? No, but I think it's possible. The T Wolves, they actually held down Nikola Jokić a little bit more than other teams. Jamal Murray was just getting used to the playoffs, so he put up a couple of strong performances in that series and then a couple of duds. I think that as he continues to get more consistent, they're going to have to put Anthony Edwards on Jamal Murray more and more. They also might put Jaden McDaniels on him, and that would be an interesting matchup for sure. But Michael Porter Jr. then has opportunities to go off. That's always going to be a thing. And I just don't know if I trust Karl Anthony Towns. Like that's a big piece of this with the T-Wolves. If they were to trade Towns for some sort of other ball handling wing or guard, then I'd feel a lot better about it. But right now, their roster just doesn't make a lot of sense. If it was Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert in the front court, along with, I don't know, hypothetically, let's say they traded Karl Anthony Towns for Paul George straight up. Like if it was Paul George next to Anthony Edwards, I feel really good about that if I were a T-Wolves fan. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that that's in the cards, but something like that would make more sense. And then the Lakers, here's the big problem with the Lakers. They're just going to get worse. Like they're not getting better. They're not like Reeves, if he was to become an all-star, like that's a little bit different. I don't see that happening. I think he gets a little bit inflated, obviously, because he plays for the Los Angeles Lakers and he's a young player and he gets a lot of fouls, and that people see that and they see the success of the free throw line. They're like, all right, cool. That's a young star right there. I don't see that. But I do see the Lakers, as long as they have LeBron and AD, they don't need that much more around those guys to be successful. They're hoping that the mix that they have now that features Reeves, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, D'Angelo Russell, Torian Prince, like they hope that that's the right role player mix. Whether it is or not, I don't know. I think they're fine. I think that they were probably the third or fourth best team in the Western Conference last year, and they just made it because they're in the weaker bracket. I think the Suns were better. I don't know. They're okay. They are still a threat, but not a strong threat. And the Warriors also, they do not have the size. Like Kevon Looney did a great job against Domantas Sabonis, but when he went up against Nikola Jokić the previous year, he was barbecue chicken. They had to go all offense with Draymond Green at center and then play off of the other guys that Jokić was playing with consistently. And that was a recipe for success against Denver without Murray and Porter. Don't think that is the same recipe for success. However, the theory of the practice with the Warriors is that they're young guys, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. I don't remember who else is young on that team. It was Jordan Poole and James Wiseman for a while, but those guys are now gone. If those guys hit, if those guys improve in tangible ways, then it could be a little bit different. If it was just Chris Paul trying to lead things and the old guard trying to carry things, that is not a recipe for success. They need more. They absolutely need more. So we will see. What is this comment? I'm trying to. All right. Well, whatever. Let's go to honorable mentions. The Grizzlies and the Thunder. They are like obviously young teams. Ja having the 25-game suspension, that's a big deal. But I do think that the Grizzlies, after trading for Marcus Smart, which makes a lot of sense for their starting lineup, they have the mix that if you just get X from another big man, or if you just get somebody who's like 6'8" or 6'9" as like that hybrid forward, then they could absolutely compete at this level. They don't have that right now, and that's a big problem. They don't have a guy to match up with that, and that really lost them against the Los Angeles Lakers. Like that was a big reason why they lost. They didn't have like Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, David Roddy, all those guys that they added, Zaire Williams. None of them really made a difference. They had to go to Xavier Tillman, and that was not the right call. They needed more. So I'm very curious to see what ultimately happens with the Grizzlies, whether they could actually get that guy or not. The Thunder is the interesting one, and they're probably not going to really make a step forward. Like they're still so young that they are behind the eight ball a little bit when it comes to when it actually comes to competing this upcoming year. I think that Shea is ready. I think that Giddey is close to ready. I don't think that Jalen Williams is ready. J-Dub. I don't think that Chet Holmgren is going to be ready. That's probably your most important two to get up to speed. Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. I think that if they can get those guys up to speed and those guys are ready sooner rather than later, then this conversation might be a little different. Maybe they challenge for a top 4 seed in the West, and you suddenly look up and the Thunder have 50 wins. And that is a pretty scary sight given all of the future first round draft picks that they have. I think that they can continue to rise. And if they do end up making a trade where you start to really condense some of those assets a little bit, that could change the perspective really quickly. So we will see what they ultimately do, what ultimately happens with them. But I think that is probably the list. So in conclusion, health is the most important thing for Denver. Then the opponents that are probably going to give them the most trouble, the Suns and the Celtics, followed by the Bucks, the T-Wolves, the Lakers, and the Warriors, and then the Grizzlies and the Thunder. This is according to Nuggets fans. My actual opinions are, I've shared them mostly, but I think the Lakers will probably be higher on that list a little bit. And the Grizzlies, if they are to find that 6'8" guy that they can trust, that is a very dangerous team. So we will see what happens. But for now, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Superbook Sports. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into the show. I really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast, as always. Not sure if I'm going to be podcasting on Friday. There's some things that are coming up, and I've got a couple of things that I would like to get to this weekend that are non-basketball related. So we'll see about that. But for now, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Let me know who your favorite player and your best player of the 2020s is. If it's not Nikola Jokić, I expect it to be Nikola Jokić, but we'll see. Hit that like button on the way out. I'll talk to you guys very soon.